The next presenter is Ms. Liisa Poussa from the VTT Risk and Reliability Knowledge Center, and Liisa will tell us more about water and risk management. So Liisa, floor is yours.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay, hello everybody, and good morning, afternoon, and evening, whatever is the time. I will talk about the risk management and water-related issues on that. The overall aim of the risk management is to ensure safe, undisturbed, and efficient production over the life cycle of the product or process. And there's, as we have heard, there's no reason that we should exclude water issues in this risk management scope. They can relate to raw water use, processed waters, water recycling, or wastewater issues. So what is actually risk management and why do we do it? Risk management refers to systematic and explicit approach to identify, analyze and control risks, different type of risks. And what do we mean when we talk about risks? Usually in normal life it's always risk is something negative. But here risk means that something could happen that will have effect on objectives. For example, ensuring the product or process safety or quality. There are different types of risk management methods, which I will introduce later, that can be applied to any stage of the product or process life cycle. And depending, of course, the focus of the risk analysis. The focus can vary. As I said, it can be ensuring the safety, for example, of the environment, but also to ensure the business continuity in different situations. The two main outputs that a risk management process will offer, it helps us to understand better the root causes and consequences of the risks, and also the control actions that are needed and which are determined based on the risk assessment and prioritization results. And it can be also argued that risk management establishes actually a base for proactive decision making and also proactive management. We act before something really bad happens. So the risk management process, the overall picture looks like this. Many times we talk about risk analysis. That means that we define the scope of the analysis, then identify and describe the risks, and estimate the greatness of the risk by evaluating the probability and also the impacts of the risks. Then if we talk about risk assessment, then we include also the risk evaluation in the risk analysis. By risk evaluation, I mean that we compare the risk analysis results with the risk criteria to determine the acceptability of the risk. And finally, the risk management process also includes the risk reduction control methods. We make risk management plan. How do we control those risks that we have identified? Communication is a really important part of this process. It means sharing the risk information with the stakeholders involved with the management process. This is also a dynamic, iterative and responsive process, meaning that we have to update the risk management plan all the time. We should sense and respond to changes. So if, for example, if a process change will be implemented, we have to update the risk management plan and see what are the new risks. In this slide, I have examples of different kind of risk analysis methods. I'm not going to go through them. That's not the point. My point is that there's a lot of different kind of methods available, but it has to be remembered all the time that the suitability of a method depends on the objectives and the scope of the analysis. We cannot use one method and cover everything with that. For example, if we have a definition base of the process, of a new process, first we may use, for example, potential problem analysis to find the possible risk in more coarse level. Then when the process goes further and we go in more detailed planning, we may use, for example, hazard and operability studies to find the more detailed level of risks, and also, for example, use accident modeling or consequence assessment to find the more detailed accident possibilities and to understand them. But of course, these need some experience and also expertise to find most suitable method for the scope. So what kind of risk may be encountered? Risks can be categorized different ways, but here I introduce one three-way categorization, hard word. The first category is preventable risks. These are kind of internal risks that are caused by the organization's own action, like malfunction of machines or occupational injuries, human errors. And then we can have sort of strategy risks. These are accepted and taken voluntarily by the organization in order to get benefits, which are in this case valued, of course, greater than the possible losses because the risks are taken. And then we have kind of external risks that are caused by external events, but these are not controlled, cannot be controlled by the organization. But this risk, of course, has to be prepared for. And next I have a few examples of these different risk categories related to water issues. Examples of preventable risks. They may relate, as we heard in previous presentations, may relate to the water quality or water quantity, occupational hazards like drowning accidents, or if we have, for example, boiling water that leak out of the water storage, or steam releases. There can be process hazards. Water can act also as a reactive substance, for example, with the strong acids. Or freezing of pipelines may cause leakages or other problems. Or environmental hazards, if we have abnormal wastewater releases, or, for example, in case of fires, there can be extensive water releases for fire extending waters, and these can be also contaminated and therefore hazardous for environment. Then a few examples of strategy risks related to water. Like we heard, the reduction of raw water use may cause some problems in the process. But if we see that those problems are smaller than the advantage that we can get of it, we may still implement the process change. The advantage may be even related to the company image or something. Or if we decide to establish industrial site close to groundwater areas, where of course if we have leakage of hazardous substance, there might be a contamination of drinking water. Same goes with if we establish the industrial site close to surface water intake area. Or if we want to invest to a new wastewater treatment method that we are not very sure how it actually acts. So do we actually meet the limits of the environmental permit? Or if we outsource, for example, the maintenance and operation of water treatment processes, that means also that we lose, in the long run, the knowledge of the treatment process. So that might cause problems in further way. These risks should of course be managed through good risk management practices. We have to reduce the probability of the consequences if something really happens. Then there's external risks, and one very good example mentioned already today is the climate change and its effects. It can cause extreme events, for example, heavy rains or snow, storms, hot and cold waves, which again can lead to the changes in quality or amount of raw water, for example. Or abnormal precipitation may lead to extensive amount of process waters, causing process problems and maybe problems even to the whole business continuity. These risks can be also political. For example, in areas where is water scarcity, there can be a political decision that the use of water in industry may be restricted somehow. And then you have to find alternatives for the raw water. Of course, we can't control these phenomena, but we have to be prepared these. So it's very important to identify these kind of risks and think about what are the possible mitigation measures. So now we have talked about some of the risks, but what can we do when we identify risks? Of course, we have to also control the risks somehow, and as I said earlier, we may make a risk management plan. There are two examples of the risk assessment results. In the upper right-hand corner, you can see the risk assessment results before any risk reduction measures are actually implemented. And again, the same risks and the risk level after the risk management plan or the risk reduction control measures are implemented. These numbers that you can see there is just risk identification number. So you can see that in this case, totally 60 risks have been identified. And the green means that we are kind of the risk is in an acceptable level. And the red one, the red area means that the risk is not acceptable. Some kind of control measures should be implemented before even continuing the action or the process or whatever is the scope. And the yellow area is something in between, risk reduction is recommended, but mainly if it's economically feasible. So in with this kind of comparisons, we can see what is the residual risk level of that certain, for example, process or whatever is the in objective of the risk assessment. In this case, I would say the process is in acceptable level, or the risks of the process are in acceptable level. Then one example you may remember when I talk about the definition of risks. There might be also positive effects, and then we may talk about opportunities. We've been involved in development of assessment tool for the climate change related risks and opportunities for power and heat plants. And this is the example of that tool. The tool consists of functional model, which means that the energy production is divided in functional parts. There's a simple example, for example, energy source, power plant, and distribution network. Then there's a seasonal plan based on climate scenarios. And that's the overview of seasonal issues incorporated in the climate scenario data and typical seasonal activities and in the power plants. The risk analysis is based on what-if method, and also there's a results part which shows the results in tables and diagrams. I have one result example in my last slide. Here's the overview of the risks and opportunities of the climate change on power and heat plants. The red triangles indicate the risks, and the green ones opportunities. The size and shape of the triangle indicates also the strength of the issue. The darker the color is, the kind of more important the issue, and the lighter the color is, it's kind of a minor issue. For example, you may see there's the red triangle in a section ACT was identified, and it's an opportunity that it was seen that climate change makes the spring last long, and it kind of becomes earlier, which reduces the flood peak in the springtime. So what that means in power plants, it eases the control of the production and also reduces the bypass flow, which the bypass flow means the amount of water flowing by the plant without entering the energy production. But if it's reduced, it also means that the production plant may gain benefits, economical benefits, because then they may produce more energy. But in order to gain that benefit, the company has to actually act quite early, because the issue is associated with the water level control and also the regulation guidelines. So that means also that the permit may have to be changed so that the opportunity may be exploited. So there's always two kinds of risks, kind of bad ones and the good ones. Thank you.
Thank you, Liisa, for the overview again. We all know that these environmental concerns are only increasing, and for that sake, the reason for proper risk management in companies, it comes unavoidable, but